Hi everybody. So we're at blocking and timing now. Your shot should look something like this. Let me turn off the controls. You'll have a pop through that's all timed out, ready to go. And our next step is to go to splines. If we right click and turn off enable step preview, we can switch back to our auto tangented uh, animation. But we don't exactly have everything we need just yet. What we need to do here is build in some holds. Holds are where a character stays in a particular pose for a little bit and then transitions into the next pose. And in order to create convincing, well animated shots, we need to have some holds in there. Like you can see here, if I just go from one set of keys to the next, the animation looks kind of mushy and soft. It's a little floaty. So we want to build in these holds so that our character has some believable motion. Now the easiest way to do this is while you're still in stepped preview. Because when we look at the graph editor for our character, we can see that's a pole vector constraint. We don't need that. We want our base control. Let's just look at our base control for a second. Actually, I think the head would be a much better choice. Our tangents are still very curvy, even though we're in enable stepped preview. So we're going to take advantage of the fact that our character holds here and use this for building our hold. So for example, at the beginning of any shot, you don't want to do anything important for about 6 frames. Anything that's vital for your audience to see, you don't want to have happen within the first 6 frames because it takes about that long, about a quarter second for your audience to go, okay, it's a lamp, it's down, I got it, now let's go. The exception to this is if you're doing a shot in continuity where a character's already in motion, you can do things within those first 6 frames because the audience is already along for the ride. In this case, we want to have at least a 6 frame hold before the character starts to lift its shade up. And then we also want to consider what the performance we're going for here is. So we want to have a nice slow lift to that hold, or excuse me, a nice slow lift to that shade. Remember, at the beginning of my shot, my character's sort of sad or depressed or exhausted or whatever you want to use, whatever term you want to use to describe that slow lift. So I know that I'm going to need at least a second of lift time, which means that the lift can't happen before frame 24. A 1 second lift is pretty quick, so I'm actually going to add another 12 frames to that, and I'm going to come back here to around frame 12. I'm going to have my shade down for 12 frames, and then I'm going to let him lift until he gets to frame 48. So that'll give us a nice slow lift. I'm hitting my shelf button here that I created for all of my controls, and then I'm just going to hit S, set a key. So now I've got a new key where all of the settings for frame 1, because we're on enable step preview, are now set at frame 12. All of those values for those keys are still the same. And if I switch to turning off enable step preview, I can scrub back and forth here and see that nothing happens between frame 1 and frame 12. And then when we hit frame 12, he starts to come up. So that's our first hold. We're holding this pose that we established at frame 1 for 12 frames. Then we're going to transition into the movement, and then we're going to add some additional holds down here to make things happen. I'm going to turn step preview back on, make sure it's on. And I want to hold briefly before he looks forward. I want to have a little bit of a quicker transition here because this is a slow lift because he kind of heard something that's going on. But we want this to happen a little more quickly. So we're going to use fewer hold frames here. So we're going to hold this pose a little less time, actually a lot less time. I'm going to hold it about 6 frames. So I'm going to back up about 6 frames to about 54. And again, with all of my controls selected, I'm going to hit S and set that key. So now, if I look here on Enable Step Preview, turn that off, come forward, he lifts up, he holds in that position, and then he goes forward. So this is the pace change here will signal to the audience that the attitude is changing. And he's going to hold in this position to get a really good look at whatever he's doing. Then we're going to go down real fast and then up. So once again, back into step preview. And by the way, I'm switching back and forth from Enable Step Preview to on and off just to show you what the result is. While you're animating, you don't need to do this unless you want to check your work. So he's going to hold at this look for a little bit, and then we're going to have a really fast transition into this take. So we're at 84. I want to bring him down fast. I'm going to back up about 3 frames and set a key. And then he'll transition quickly into this and then back into this surprise pose. And once again, I'm going to turn off Enable Step Preview, and we'll see he lifts up really slow and then looks forward a little faster, and then he's going to stay there for a little bit, and then he comes down really quick and up into that pose. So how that looks is something like this. And now that I've got this, got the holds in, and I can see in spline mode how the action looks, I can make any additional timing adjustments that I want to make. So for example, we come down into the anticipation over 3 frames, but then we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 going up into this last pose. That's a little slow as far as I'm concerned. Again, this is how I feel about the shot. So I'm going to hold down Shift and click to select that key, and I'm just going to move it back a couple of frames. I don't want the range of frames here to equal the range of frames here because I still want to have a little bit of variety, a little bit of texture in my timing, but I do want to speed that up a little bit. So I'm going to rewind, and we'll hit play. And that changing just those 2 frames, bringing that last key in 2 frames, makes a huge difference in the way that the lamp reacts. So that's setting holds. Remember, do it with your Enable Step to Preview on. The other way you can do it, I'm going to go ahead, come over here. We'll leave it in splines, so it's doing all this. And I'm going to take this key out right here. I'm going to go ahead and cut that. And now you can see we got the whole transition happening over the range of frames. The other way you can do it, if you don't want to go into step preview, really want to see what the splines look like as you start to time it out, as you start to put in the holds, the other way you can do it is place your playback head on the frame that you want to use as your hold frame, middle mouse click, and drag out. And you can see that I can drag this as far as I want, and my character's not moving at all. If I put the playback head on any frame, it doesn't have to have keys on it, it can be any frame, middle mouse click and drag, it's copying the data for all of the selected controls from that frame and dragging it forward with the playback head. So now all I have to do is hit S to set another key, and you can see that again, my hold is in place. and I already have my splines going. So that's another way to go. You can either take advantage of enable stepped preview, or when you've got a hold key that you really like, and by the way, your hold might be, maybe I want to have like a little bit of a hold right here where he looks up partway and then continues to this position. So, maybe around here, frame 29 or so, he's going to hold that. We'll set that key. Actually, I don't even need to do that, do I? Let's undo that. I'm going to take this, I'm going to bring it forward, and here I'm going to set that key. And what that'll do is it will change the timing of this. So he'll come up a little slow, and then he'll pick up speed. Because it takes the data from that frame, whatever frame we middle mouse click on and drag it forward or back, it takes the data on the controls from that frame, and when you set a key, it moves it to the new frame. I kind of like that, actually. I'm going to keep that, and then we're going to, in the next video, we're going to talk about doing offsets. And offsets are a way to make your animation look a little less robotic, a little less mechanical. Nothing starts and stops at the same time, and that's true of our friend here as well. And we're going to go ahead in the next video and talk about how to do offsets so that you can loosen things up.